Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and let me ask you a question. How many of you out there are worried, and I mean really worried, that President Trump cannot win in 2024? And I ask this because just this weekend, I read an op ed in the supposedly conservative Washington Examiner by their editor in chief, who argued that Trump is basically guaranteed to lead the Republican Party to an electoral disaster in November. And yet, ironically, more and more pollsters and pundits are actually coming to the radically opposite conclusion. Not only can Trump win, he's actually better positioned to win now than he's ever been. Not only can he win, but far from leading the Republicans to an electoral disaster, he's actually the only one. He's the only hope for the GOP in 2024. In other words, you may have heard this phrase because it's gaining popularity among analysts. For the Republicans, it's Trump or bust. That's actually the exact phrase that was used in a Hill piece just a few days back. But my guest today has been saying those exact words, Trump or bust, for months now. In fact, he's the very source of the slogan, and he's here to share with us why Trump is stronger than ever and why he's actually the only hope for the GOP in 2024. Rich Baris, aka the People's Pundit. I know for most of you, he needs no introduction. You've seen him on Fox. He's a regular on Steve Bannon's War Room. But for those who don't know, Rich, he is considered by many, myself included, to be hands down the single best polling analyst out there by far. You've got to subscribe to his YouTube channel, follow him on Twitter. I'm a huge fan of his Inside the Numbers podcast. I was just listening to the live stream a couple of hours back. He's got a great locals platform, of which I'm a proud member. We have links all down. He offers weekly polling updates and analysis. And of course, he is the first to have coined Trump or bust. So if you want to know today what the legacy media pollsters are going to be talking about weeks from now, Rich is your guy. So Rich, welcome back, friend. Great to see you.
That was a heck of an introduction, and thank you for it. I really appreciate it. There's just two things I got to say off the top. One is I've been meaning to tell you this, but we haven't spoken. Your segment with Dr. Gorka was amazing on Newsmax. Recently.
Thank you.
It was really one of the best segments I've seen in a long time.
Awesome.
Because you were talking about the rise of populism and Europe and everything was really fascinating. And then secondly, the Trump or bust phrase. I of course, I was the first one to use it, but I actually got it from voters telling us during interviews when we asked, who are you going to vote for? It's Trump or bust. I'm voting for Donald Trump. Trump or bust. And then when we would go on to ask them about other, okay, well, what about Ron DeSantis and Joe Biden? Who would you vote for? Didn't you hear me? Trump or bust. I wouldn't vote. So this became a real thing, and we always knew it was there because of the empirical evidence simply showing that voters come out for Trump and that Republicans cannot get to the polls. And I wanted to try to measure this. So here we are today.
Yeah, and you've been doing a stellar job. You've been doing an amazing job. Just the Inside the Numbers programs have been on fire of late, and your interviews are great. I mean, I'm really I got to tell you, Rich. I mean, probably the most common question I've been getting is, but can Trump do it? Can he really, really do it? Because of all of these op-eds, because, I mean, DeSantis' surrogates want everyone to think, oh, no, there's no way he could win, blah, blah, blah. But then what's so brilliant about your analysis is it's actually the exact opposite. There is no way DeSantis even has a prayer in this thing, or anybody else for that matter. I wanted to start with the Wall Street Journal that just poll that just came out over the weekend, because it had Donna Brazile and George Stephanopoulos, in the corner sucking on their thumbs over ABC, and I just saw today the donor class Republicans over at National Review. It's a poll that has Trump absolutely running away with the nomination. He's beating DeSantis 59-13.
Yep.
I heard you mention Ed Rollins in the live stream. Ed Rollins, the pro DeSantis supporter, or wherever he happens to be of the day, he's now saying openly Trump is unbeatable for the nomination. And in the general, Trump and Biden are tied. Even though Wall Street Journal, I looked back at the Real Clear Politics aggregate for 2020, their last poll had Biden up by 10.
Yeah.
Can you flesh out for us what's going on here? What's the significance of those numbers? Why are we seeing the far left activists disguised as journalists over at ABC starting to really honestly freak out over this?
Yeah, and I would say it's important to note they did ask with Cornell West on the ballot as well, and Trump was actually up by 1, very, very close to what we just found last week in our national poll. Very close margin, very similar margin in the primary, but also in the general election, we were just a little bit more. Trump had a lead, a small one, but a lead without Cornell West, and his lead grew by about 1.5 with Cornell West. And I think that's important because Cornell West will be on the ballot. I mean, in most, if not all states.
Green Party candidate, right.
And definitely in states that matter, Democrats will try like crazy to keep him off, but he's Cornell West, and they got to be careful with how they are perceived to keeping, a black liberal off the ballot. I mean, it's going to look really bad optically. But they're flipping out because it's dawning on them. And to give credit where it's due, Harry Enton from CNN, I've given him credit now for probably 6 weeks or so. He's been one of the few in the election mafia that do what I do, that have been honest with people. And just looking at this empirically, Steve, he is in a better position today. Donald Trump is in a better position post-indictment, post-mugshot indictments, 40-something indictments. He's in a better position today than he ever was against Biden in 2020 and against Hillary Clinton in 2016 when he won. And remember, with that Biden plus 10 final poll from the Wall Street Journal, Biden won by less votes than Trump won over Hillary Clinton in 16. Wow. Very close election, even though the Electoral College kind of looks big. We're talking about tens of thousands of votes across a handful of battleground states. That's it. So I think, Donna Brazile, certainly a partisan, and somebody willing to give debate questions ahead of time, which is outrageous. It's an outrageous breach of trust and ethics, but she did it, and when she's coming to that conclusion, David Axelrod is warning before, do not post his mugshot. Do not do it. You're going to martyr him. They understand what a lot of partisans, because they want it to be true, on the right and the left don't understand, which is that political martyrs, people who are being persecuted and the public sees them as being politically persecuted, do win elections. We've seen it in America in isolated incidents. We just never seen it for the presidency. And I think that's why a little of this is hard for some people to understand. But Bibi Netanyahu, Nelson Mandela, the president right now to the south of us in Mexico, Brazil with Lula, who did time. These people have all one thing in common. They didn't let the media peg them into this corner where these accusations are believable. They're overwhelming. They're significant. Every single one of them successfully made the narrative that I am being persecuted. And because they use these novel theories, I mean, Steve, none of these theories are something people can understand. He took a bribe. He punished somebody politically. He did like something you would expect in an abuse of power case. None of that. This is novel nonsense that people look at and say, okay, so the crook is trying to get his political opponent thrown in jail. I mean, that's what most people say. And this non-white vote share that he is seeing now, don't ask a white pundit in DC, whether they're liberal or conservative, what Black America thinks. They know nothing about that. This is something that made Donald Trump relatable to a lot of non-white people, and they screwed up.
That to me is so fascinating, because what Donna Brazile did admit is that the old playbook just doesn't apply anymore. I mean, the mugshot, the indictments that should have crushed him politically, at least as far as the logic of the political class is concerned, has only made him stronger. And that's where I think your polling is so fascinating, because you found that one of the reasons why Trump is doing so well in the polls right now, why he's positioned stronger than ever in many respects, is because he's overperforming or outperforming with voters who the Republicans consistently underperform with. Can you flesh that out for us?
There are a couple of groups that really need to be highlighted. Non-white voters, and by the way, this is in the New York Times today, but this is what we've been talking about for months. Non-white voters who make less than 100,000 combined in the household, and then the underclass in general, which is under 30,000, traditionally a Democratic voting group. The heart of the party, the Republican Party, is really 50 to 100,000. That's where they've been doing better. Anything below 200,000, Trump is just cleaning up with, including all of those other income brackets. And the question is how and why. It's because he's outperforming with non-whites that also are in those income brackets and younger voters who are non-white, which is insane. But when I say below the age of 45 specifically, you can even the only place where there's a change that favors Democrats is among some seniors, but the change is only like 2 points. When you're talking about 10 to 25 point shifts among all these other groups, that 2 point shift with seniors and super seniors is just, it doesn't hold up. It's not enough to counter that. So those groups are really super key. And it's not just black voters, Hispanic voters. Most Republicans poll among black voters. Most Republicans poll around 6% and are polling 8% nationally if they're on a good day. Trump is at 19%. 19. So again, we're not one of those pollsters who had him at 20, 25% in 2020. We had him at 6% in 2016 or 8 maybe, and we had him at 12% in 2020, which is exactly what the National Exit Poll said suggested he got. So we are not one of those. There are polls out there that consistently overstate Republican share of non-white votes. We're not one of them. So and that leaves out the Hispanic shift altogether. But this is real. This and people like Donna Brazile, I think, are really seeing it now. And when it wasn't just her, I mean, there was widespread panic this weekend, and it's because it's starting to kick in. I think
Stephanopoulos used the word shocked. It's shocking to see this, but of course, no, it's not. I mean, if they had been tuning into your analysis, you wouldn't have been shocked in the least. These are trajectories that we've been seeing. It's so interesting because it does seem to suggest how successful Trump has been in being able to, I was just talking about this in a video earlier today, and being able to recast presidential elections as an animosity, not between Republicans versus Democrats, but an animosity between the people versus the political class. And that's extraordinary because if you think about it, if your party represents the people, I mean, the ability to be able to scale past 100 million is really doable, because if you can identify the Democratic Party as the party of the permanent political class that rules for its own values, interests, and concerns, and who despise your values, interests, and concerns, if you're able to do that, that just changes the game. And so you're going to get polls that show that voters who are generally almost always reliably voting, say, Democrat, are now suddenly voting Trump. It's I think we could forget what a shock 2016 was with states like Wisconsin and Iowa and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I mean, Iowa voted for Dukakis, for heaven's sakes, in '88.
Yeah, so did Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin voted for Dukakis,
and now Iowa votes for Trump by 10 points. It's a radical paradigm shift with the particularly with the working class. Originally it was the white working class in 2016. Non-whites still were relatively loyal to the Democrats, but your data shows a comparable shift among the non-white working class now as well.
That's really the the big fire that Democrats now realize they have, and they have to try to put out. But I don't. Here's why when it's Donald Trump, when we're talking about Donald Trump on the ballot, I don't know that they can do that. At best, maybe they can hope that some of them that are at risk of voting for Trump maybe stay at home, don't vote. Although I don't believe that's going to happen. I'm saying that's if you were a Democratic strategist, that's what you would want, because Trump is great at recasting these narratives, making himself the victim, because I personally think it's easy to see how Trump is the victim, but it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the voters think. They helped him. When you start rounding up grandmas who just offered to serve as alternative electors, and then start throwing them in, in the county jail, and then trying, right, it's insane, seeking 15 to 17 years for nonviolent crimes. I mean, this is insane. And you're making Trump's argument for him. And not for nothing, but there are segments of the population in this country, whether white conservatives want to admit it, it's true. They've dealt with this for a while over sentencing and harassment. They know something about the system that I think some Republicans are just starting to figure out. So as these Republicans look at this race, they're like, well, there's just no way independents are going to vote for him with these felonies. Let me just give one data point. In Florida, which is Governor Ron DeSantis' own state, in June, we had Trump leading by 20, but Ron DeSantis was in the 30s. Trump was in the 50s at that point already. That was an expansion of Trump's much smaller lead that he had the month before that, which was about 12 points, and Trump was in the 40s the month prior. And this trend is unbelievable. Now Trump is blowing him out of the water. DeSantis has fallen to basically 20%, 1 out of 10 in his own home state. And then when you pit him against DeSantis versus Biden and Trump versus Biden, in the prior two polls, DeSantis still led Biden, even though he was getting creamed in the primary. He still led Biden by roughly the same margin that Trump did. This month, no more. Trump is crushing Biden in Florida, but DeSantis is basically tied. What is that from? One of the biggest chunks were independent Hispanics who said Trump or bust. Every single one of them who said I would write in someone wrote in Donald Trump.
Wow.
Every single one. I can't tell you how significant. I can't overstate the significance of what we're seeing, because for months we were simply asking people, would you just not vote if you're a person? And of course, Donald Trump's the only one who had significant number of people saying this. They were saying I would not vote if my person was not the nominee. But somebody gave me an idea, and it was actually someone from Locals, and it said, look, maybe they'll want to vote down ballot. Maybe they will, and they just won't leave. They'll leave the president blank, but maybe they'll write him in. I mean, basically every state's got a write-in option. Right. So I love that idea. That's why I love Locals, because it's more of an interaction, and you know that you're on there. And I love that idea. So we ran with it. And so, for instance, just to give people an idea, 7% of the entire electorate in the DeSantis versus Trump matchup in Florida, 7% said they would write someone in. And of those people, 95% chose Donald Trump.
Wow.
95%. So DeSantis is essentially tied in his own home state, because about 1.2 to 1.4 million people just tell us they'll write in Donald Trump. And I believe them. I mean, this is the thing, Dr. Steve. If they're telling you something, don't dismiss them. I did that one time in 2016
with Wisconsin voters. Is that?
No, it's actually Ohio and southeastern Ohio.
Okay, yeah.
And we had Trump up by 5 in the poll we did right before our last poll, and then I just didn't believe that so many Obama Trump voters, because we had their voter history, they told us who they voted for. I just didn't believe it. Number one, that they were really going to vote for Trump in those numbers after voting for Barack Obama.
Yeah, twice.
Twice. And it was not just the Southeast, excuse me. It was like the whole eastern part of the state, those two regions. And I not only didn't believe that, but I also didn't believe that they would make up that much of the vote in the state, and that Cuyahoga would go down so much because they were going to outvote Cuyahoga that much. So I went with a traditional weighting model, got a Trump +3. And I looked obviously like I understated Trump's support. If I went back and reweighted and just listened and believed, we would have had a Trump +7 actually. And it would have been much closer.
Yeah.
You know, and it confused me because I very clearly saw the state was trending to Trump, and it was nagging in the back of my mind. I'm like, we went from Trump +5 to Trump +3. This just doesn't feel right. But in order to justify, a higher margin, I gotta believe this many people are going to change their mind. After that, I learned my lesson.
Yeah, that's amazing. You gotta believe the respondent. That was that's a lesson you teach us as we listen to your analysis. And what's so fascinating about this Trump or bust vote entailed in it, that's why I love the phrase, is that this is Trump specific polling. This polling does not translate to a generic Republican candidate, or frankly to any other Republican candidate, correct?
That's exactly right. We ask this of everyone, including Democrats. The only one who has any kind of significant, something else to measure that's of significance is Robert Kennedy Jr., which is something else that is really interesting. They are about 30% of Trump's primary vote alone says that they will not vote for anybody but Donald Trump. And whether or not they stay home, actually, now that we had separated the write-in, about 30% say they'll write him in. Another 4.5%, 5% say they just won't vote. Robert Kennedy Jr. also has, significant, being in the 30s of people who say, but it's not write-in. It's I would vote for Donald Trump.
Right.
So this is like a soon-to-be disgruntled group of people that will never vote for another Republican. So there's multiple things happening here, is my point. There's that opportunity with some of Robert Kennedy Jr.'s voters. And it's not, when you look at that percentage and think about it in terms of votes, it's not a lot, but every bit counts in an election that is won on the margins in this country now. Every bit will count, especially where it's coming from. It's coming from the Midwest, and it's coming from parts of the West, which is exactly where they need that vote. And some in the Northeast, but not as much as the Midwest, which is the highest number. But nowhere else, not Nikki Haley, not Ron DeSantis. Almost everyone else will vote for Donald Trump uniformly. If he's the nominee, they would vote for others. It's Trump's voter. And that 30% only counts the Republican vote. This is the thing, Steve. That's only the Republican vote. A lot of people we poll aren't eligible to vote in a Republican primary because they live in a closed primary state. So we have to look to it. The independent vote that's going, that's not eligible, or people who say, I don't vote in primaries, but I'll vote in the general. That is a whole other chunk that we clearly see says that they'll write in or they won't vote. So I have to remind Republicans they were absolute losers before Donald Trump came along. You were losers. Gone are the days where a presidential candidate can get 60 million votes or 55 million votes and be competitive. They're going to harvest, they being Democrats, 80 to 90 million votes, maybe more, who knows. And if you don't get somebody who can squeeze every drop of blood from that stone, you're going to get crushed. And when I mean crushed, in the last national poll, we ran it. It suggests that Indiana's gone for Republicans. It's gone.
Wow.
Florida looks like it very well could be gone, although it's right on the line. Indiana is gone, and Missouri is on the line like Florida is on the line. North Carolina's gone. Michigan isn't even close. It's +13 for Biden. Wisconsin is +9. Pennsylvania is almost +9, just about the same. It's over. It's over. It's a 1-hour election night.
And that's if Trump is not on that ballot.
That's if Trump is not on that ballot. They will be missing just way too many voters. You just cannot, you can't count on that kind of vote that they used to get pre-Trump. You just can't. And these people, again, they're deadly serious. And, sometimes Republicans are so arrogant, or at least I'm talking about establishment Republicans. One party you want
the donor class. That's what I was going to ask you. So, I mean, everything you are saying in terms of the Trump or bust vote is brilliant. I mean, you've got the data behind it. It's thoroughly evidential and so forth. And yet you get the Republicans at National Review. I'm thinking of Andrew McCarthy, right? Or we saw the editor-in-chief at the Washington Examiner. The donor class elite Republican ilk are all doing everything they possibly can to get rid of Trump. I've said this over and over again. And I know you share the same perspective, that these indictments aren't happening because of what Democrats are doing. They're happening because of what Republican leadership is allowing.
They're allowing it.
They're
Yeah.
allowing it. The moment they start coming after, like, some LA DA coming after, say, Greg Abbott, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. Well, then, I mean, the Republican establishment, you can't touch one of us. That kind of, we're the uniparty. What are you doing, right? But they want Trump gone. They're going so far as actually defending the integrity of these indictments. I mean, it's beyond absurd, precisely because they don't seem to realize that getting rid of President Trump spells electoral disaster. How do you account for that disconnect among them? I mean, they don't appeal to any data as far as I could see. It's just all feel. Well, no one's going to vote for a felon.
Yeah, that's generally all they have left. But I really think some of them don't even believe it. I was, talking to some donors who asked me this question on Saturday night, and I really just had this answer. I really think, and they know this is true because they know these people. They're in this group. They're just one of the rare ones who prioritize winning over, over Trump. They don't hate Trump so much that, and they're rare. They are the gross minority in this donor class. But this is how I responded: that basically Republicans would rather lay on the floor underneath the table and eat the crumbs that Democrats knock off on accident when they're gorging on everything on their plate, right? Then sit at the table if Donald Trump is at that table. Right. And part of this is corruption. They are not who they pretend to be. And Donald Trump is a problem for them because he exposes that. They're constantly failing their voters, breaking their promises. And then a lot of this is war. This, this big, this Ukraine war that they obviously want to turn into a bigger conflict. I mean, they're just openly, lamenting the possibility that Donald Trump gets in and, turns the spigot off.
Ends it in 24 hours, as you said. Exactly, because we're the only ones propping them up at this point. That's right.
That's exactly right. George Soros just made a comment like 72 hours ago about this. And the Republicans, sadly, there's just so many of them that. And I think jealousy has something to do with it too. Talking about what's happening with Ken Paxton in Texas. This is the Bushies. That's the Bush family fighting, and the Bush and their acolytes fighting to control power in a state over. They're fighting over power and control in a state that they can no longer win elections in. Right. So they use bribery, coercion, corruption in order to assert their power because their family is wealthy and powerful. Right. And they got, at a ballot box, they get their butts kicked. Right. So what do? They have to remove Trump. They have to remove his allies. There's a purging movement in Georgia as well. Who's leading it? Brian Kemp. So it's like people are wondering, why isn't Brian Kemp stepping in? Why isn't anybody doing anything? Because they're in on it. They're in on it. I've known some of these people for a long time. They never liked Donald Trump. They would rather get a piece of the crumbs, folks. They would rather have the crumbs and Democrats are just sitting back like, what a bunch of idiots. Yeah. We're going to have one party rule. This is going to be great. They're committing suicide. It's like watching the Democrats sabotage and take out and target Barack Obama.
Right.
Only worse because Trump means more to the Republican base. Right. I really believe that than Barack Obama means to the Democratic base. And he meant a lot.
Right. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. They just seem to occupy such a different cultural space than the rank and file grassroots. Oh, yeah. Like you said, one that's just filled with corruption and power and affluence. And you don't even have to be in the majority. I mean, Mitch McConnell has just as much, influence in DC as minority leader as if he's a majority leader. He doesn't care. He just wants to make sure he's there winning staring contests and the like. But it seems to be that it's very similar to what's happening to the conservatives in the UK after they saw the working class move in mass over to the Tories. Yeah, squandered exactly.
I mean, squandered it.
I mean, they won, it was anticipated by Brexit in 2016. And then they won in December 2019, the biggest landslide victory in the
Huge.
century, because the working class districts that had never voted for the Tories came over and voted in mass for the Conservatives, the Tories, and Boris Johnson blew. I mean, he blew it with his rabidly pro-war stance with Ukraine that the working class in England want nothing to do with. And it just seemed like the Tory political establishment just occupied such a fundamentally different cultural space from the rank and file grassroots working class anti-globalist voter. And I think it really corroborates your Trump or bust thesis, just seeing what happened to Johnson, his political demise. The conservatives, before the our interview, I just checked it out. Labor is pummeling the conservatives by 14 points right now.
It's unbelievable how this has turned around. This is a dire warning for Republicans. What you brought up is really a great analogy. This has happened in this country before. Reagan was able to bring over a vote. Republicans were not able to win. I've gone over this with Wisconsin, Michigan maps. You can overlay Trump's map in Wisconsin with Reagan's map. It's almost totally identical. And yet Dukakis took Wisconsin. And by the way, before with Wisconsin, that was the one poll I just didn't believe. And I trusted him. I trusted the data. And I just said, whatever, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So in 2016, with that Trump +1 or whatever it was, I just released it because I was tired of fighting with my own head. But that's what the data said.
You turned out to be right.
I told Larry Schweikert, I'll never forget it. He's like rushing me for the results. And I'm like, you know what, Larry? Here it is. I'll share them with you. If I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't think I'm right. That's what I told him. And by the way, how I saw Wisconsin go that day is when I mean, that's how I knew immediately that I was going to be right. And everybody else was going to be, just about everybody else was going to be wrong. Wisconsin fell first and I was stunned. I didn't think it would. So basically, though, this is an exaggerated, more severe version of what happened the last time the Republican establishment and donor class seized control of the party from the base, from the middle of the country. Mm-hmm. And that resulted in Ross Perot. They gave Herbert Walker Bush one chance, and he betrayed them. And for people who think that my numbers are off or exaggerated, I think you need a history lesson. Ross Perot ate up Herbert Walker Bush's vote. And I don't care what anybody says. There are people who voted for Perot who probably wouldn't vote for both parties any day. But obviously, Republicans were winning solid majorities. They went from that to solid popular vote majorities to getting crushed by Bill Clinton, who got 40+% of the vote. That's it. You know, so what happened there? The Ross Perot coalition, very similar to what we see in demographically. The difference with Trump's is that it's less white, Steve, and it's younger. And amazing? So the risk here, or not even the risk, like the danger here is far greater than it was during the quote Ross Perot fracture. That'll make Ross Perot look like a paper cut. This is what's coming compared to it. We call it a fracture. It's not compared to what's coming, because these will be young voters, middle-aged voters who will be pissed off for a generation. And it will, again, Democrats sitting back like, one party rule, party rule, you idiots. So, again, and that's important to note, they don't care about the persecution, because to them, and I tried to explain this yesterday on Twitter to the guy who runs Town Hall, you can write 10 paragraphs about how you think Trump's going to lose because of the felony without having any data or anything to source it. Even if he gets a felony, which he probably will. I think it's likely he will. But none of that answers the question voters ask us all the time, which is, so what? What if we did pick somebody else? They'll just do it to them anyway. If they're true to us the way Trump was true to us, they're just going to do the same thing to them. And that is true. They got the Martha's Vineyard migrant thing in the barrel ready to.
Definitely. Well, again, LA district attorney is already looking at charging Abbott in Texas.
That's right. And they're using that for what? For precedent to use against DeSantis if
Exactly.
if they need to. Right now,
Right.
they're just not worried about DeSantis because the truth is, and I know his supporters hate it when I say it,
Yeah.
but the truth
There's
is,
there's
nobody in
nothing
the
to worry
Democratic
about.
Party is worried about him, even if he
There's
wasn't
nothing to
nominated.
worry about. No.
There's nothing to worry about. They know
Yeah.
they can beat him. So
Yeah. Oh my, Kenda. Yeah. It seems like,
sorry.
at this point, yeah. I mean, I saw Nikki Haley was starting to nip at his heels a bit
Yeah.
too. Well, I mean, it's just, yeah. Gang, this is exactly what you get on a weekly basis from Rich's analysis. I just couldn't recommend his locals membership platform more. I'm a member, and his
Thank you.
weekly data and analysis are absolute gold. You're going to love it. So make sure you just click on the link below, avail yourself of Rich's work, subscribe to his YouTube channel, follow him on Twitter, sign up and join the locals program that he has. Absolutely amazing, amazing stuff. Rich, man, you're doing God's work. Thank you so much for all that you do. And I know you had a long day. You did a live stream. You were over at Charlie Kirk's show before this. You got mine.
That's great, though.
Get yourself some lunch, relax. You're the best, man. You
Real
really are. Thank you. Thank you for enlightening everyone on the Trump and bust reality and just how out of touch the Republican elite donor class establishment really is.
Well, anytime, and thanks for having me on to talk about it. By the way, my locals community loves you. Loves you.
Oh,
So
I love it. Well,
absolutely. Constantly sharing videos, sending me, messaging me videos. Your content's great. So I
it's because I
really
name
appreciate
drop
that.
you like every week. I mean,
No, even without him, I'm telling you.
you for polls and Barnes for legal analysis. I'm name dropping constantly. So
And I
anyway,
appreciate that too. I do. But yeah, I love the show. I love the stuff you do as well. So thanks for having me on and let me, discuss this with people because
absolutely.
I think it's
Well,
probably the most important thing in the nomination process to understand. And it's getting play, but it needs to get
yeah,
more.
yeah, needs to get more, and you're doing it, man. We'll have you back real soon, Rich.
Thanks, buddy.